where the West begins in Fort Worth, Texas, to around the globe. You are listening to Talk in the Night. And now, your host, Paranormal Phil. Thank you, and good evening, good morning, wherever you may be around the world, around the globe, or even in your own backyard. I am Paranormal Phil, and later on in the show tonight, we're going to be joined by my guest, Don Allison, as we talk about Ghost of the Civil War and his books about it. But first, up on the Talk in the Night website, under Story of the Day, Gettysburg, a paranormal hotspot for the Civil War ghost. On July 1st, 1863, Gettysburg started out innocently, but by the end of the day, the town had turned on its side and would become the site of the largest battle in North America and the bloodiest of the Civil War. Over a 3-day period, about 72,000 Confederate and about 94,000 Union soldiers would clash with around 51,000 killed, wounded, or captured. The streets basically ran red with blood, and the stench from the dead bodies in the hot sun most likely made it unbearable for the nearly 3,000 residents. Because of such, the Travel Channel has named the site in Gettysburg the most haunted and made the Discovery Channel's 10 most haunted list. It is said that nearly 1,400 Confederate soldiers are buried in various locations around the town. Of course, you can read more about that and see more images by clicking on the link under Story of the Day. So let's talk about my guest here real quick before we bring him in. Let me get it up there real quick. As a journalist, he's covered trials for murder and corrupt politicians, uncovered environmental threats, and fascinating personal stories. He's interviewed war heroes from World War I through Iraq and written a very popular weekly column. And for more than 2 decades, he has authored books about the Civil War, local history, and after all that, his life has gotten very interesting. Of course, we're going to be talking about those books tonight. Let's see. I'm not going to... If you want his bio, I will post it up on the Talk on the Night website later because there's a lot there, and I had it edited down, but something happened. So let's welcome my guest, Don Allison, to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Also, there is a chat bubble if anybody wants to chat on the show. And everything like that. Okay, so tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a latecomer to the paranormal field. I worked for decades in newspapers, started out as a sports writer in high school for a local paper, and I spent many years as a daily newspaper editor, Bryan Times in Northwest Ohio, later was senior editor, and I left that to publish books on the Civil War, regional Midwest history. And after my wife and I purchased an 1830s house that turned out to be very paranormally active, I went from being a total skeptic to someone who now researches, writes about, and investigates the paranormal.
So buying that and experiencing the paranormal activity, was that before or after Gettysburg?
I had written Civil War before having experiences on the paranormal in Gettysburg. Actually, my early visits to Gettysburg were strictly for history, not the paranormal. It's only after writing about the paranormal, looking into it, that I started being, I guess, sensitive or open to paranormal experiences. I developed kind of a sense for the energies involved being surrounded by it in my own home, and I started realizing really what's going on in Gettysburg in terms of paranormal encounters. So it's really been kind of an evolution. Okay. And my first book incorporates, the title is I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg, a journalist's journey into the paranormal, but it incorporates both experiences in our house and on the battlefield at Gettysburg.
Okay. So before we get into the books and everything about that, because in your bio you mentioned about interviewing war heroes from World War I to Iraq. Did they mention anything about paranormal experiences? Because I know there's been people that have had experiences while in the military.
None of them did, but I have never really broached the topic with veterans, to be honest with you. I did have an incident involving a close friend of mine that was very unusual, and it happened after his passing. He was a bombardier on B-17 bombers during World War II.
Okay.
And he, we got to be close friends. He was a newspaper man, and after his passing, a little while after his passing, I had a very strange dream. He had eyesight issues, so I would take him out to eat, or we would do like road trips, maybe go catch a minor league baseball game. And I really missed that. And I had a very realistic dream that I had gotten, his name was Jack, that I had gotten with Jack, and we had gone out to eat, and we were exploring some local historic sites. And I woke up, and I was just elated. This dream was so realistic, I can still picture it vividly in my mind today, that, wow, I got to spend another day with my friend Jack. Now, about 3 days later, I made a trip to Gettysburg. And this was actually my first trip there associated with the paranormal. And I was with a group of investigators, and we were being given a tour of the battlefield. And this young lady I had met the evening before, never met her before that. I didn't even remember her name at the time. But I'm talking to our tour guide and asking some very pointed questions about the Rosewoods. Mm-hmm. And the medium's looking at me, and when I'm done talking to our tour guide, she said, "Excuse me, but can I ask you something?" I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, you have somebody with you?" And I'm like, "What?" She says, "Yeah." She said, "At first I thought he was a dead tourist, but he's laughing, he's poking fun at you, saying like useless information. And said, "I'm with him." And I'm not making a connection as to what this is, but it slowly began to dawn on me as she's describing how he looked, how he was dressed. Mm-hmm. She described my friend Jack to a T. Now, you might think, why in the world would this happen at Gettysburg?
Yeah.
Two things. Number one, the tour guide had on a Detroit Tiger hat. Jack and I are both very great Detroit Tiger fans. We're always talking Tigers. And the other part of it is the Gettysburg Connection. 4 members of Jack's B-17 crew were from Gettysburg or very close by, including his best friend, the co-pilot of the plane, who had just died about the time Jack did. And that was so uncanny. That just really made an impression on me. Mm-hmm. And I addressed that in one of my books.
Okay, so it was just that connection, not only to you, but of course to that area because of them being from that area. Correct.
And he had visited Gettysburg frequently because of those, his other veteran, friends, being in contact with them.
Okay, so now, because I want to ask a couple more things before we get into the books and everything like that. But tell people a little bit about the weekly column that you write. Does any of that have to do with like your things that you talk about in your book, or anything about the paranormal, or is it just something different?
I sometimes touch on the paranormal. The title of the column is on my mind, and I've been writing it off and on since the 1980s, but I made it regular in the 90s. And it's quite popular, but it's called On My Mind, and it can be about anything.
Okay.
I talked about losing a cat on the roadway fairly recently. I've talked about my thoughts of the absolute horrors going on in Ukraine right now. Sometimes I'll touch on some political issues. We have a very large salmon farm going into our area now, and they're making huge draws on our aquifer, which is really of prime importance and potential ecological issues there. And I've written about that at length. And I feel very gratified since I retired from the paper early, but I was asked to continue the column, and it is very gratifying that people stop me at the grocery store, on the street, send me emails or call talking about the column, and I do enjoy it very much.
All right. So now your website mentions you're a historian with the Williams County, Ohio, and I cannot find it right this second, but anyways, Williams County, Ohio, in Williams County, Ohio, has that played a helping hand in writing the books about the Civil War, or was that prior to? Well, you mentioned about being a historian before getting into the paranormal, but has it helped you with writing the books and everything?
Yes, it has. I am an amateur historian. I mean, I studied some history in college, but I majored in journalism. So I've become acquainted with many historians through the society, association with other societies. We've had some incredibly good historians here in our county that I have jointly done projects with. I've edited some books that they've done, and yes, it has enhanced my historical research and ability very, very much. I've been a member of the board of that society since, I believe, 1982.
All right, because I'm hearing sounds in the background. I don't know if you're close to a road or anything like that, or if it's a banshee welling, but
actually, we are somewhat close to a road, and it's been raining, so you're probably hearing the car tires.
Yeah, because you mentioned about your house being haunted, so I wanted to make sure.
Well, I will say that there have been EVPs come through when I have been on podcasts before. I did not hear them, but the hosts of the radio show did. Okay. And others in the chat room for that show heard them, which I found very interesting.
Okay, so all those that are listening to the show live or in the recording, if you hear anything, let me know, just in case I might miss it. But like I said, I heard the cars going by, and I wanted to make sure.
If I haven't had any banshees, we get some other interesting things, though.
But, yeah, because, it just sounded like the well of like a banshee with the cars going by. That's why my Irish heritage just brought up banshees.
Oh, I'm Irish, too.
I'm German, Irish, Scottish, English, so.
Yeah, me too. Plus some French and other things thrown in.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, you were on the show prior. I think it's been quite a few years.
It was prior to the pandemic, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was.
I recall it.
I want to say it was probably about 5 years ago or so. I can't remember, but I would have to go back and look. But for those that did not hear that show or don't know about the first book, I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg. Can you give a little bit about that book so the listeners know what it's about?
Yeah, certainly. The best way to describe it is it's really my personal journey grappling with encountering paranormal incidents and experiences starting in my house. I thought at times I was losing my mind. Luckily, other people helping at the house experienced it. My wife experienced things. And I would talk to my coworkers at the newspaper, and everyone said, "You need to write about this." And I resisted that.
Okay.
I thought people would think that I've lost my mind. I really did. I thought I would lose my credibility, as a journalist. Excuse me, having a little bit of pollen issues tonight.
Yeah. Same here.
But I was able to overcome that finally, and mainly with my wife's urging. And again, my coworkers, I did write the book, and it opened incredible doors for me. I'm so glad that I took that step.
Okay, so when was the first experience at Gettysburg? And what location did you have that experience?
The very first things that I had happen at Gettysburg, my wife and I were there on our anniversary. We had purchased the house maybe a year or so before this. It took a lot of renovation, several years of renovation. And I thought, while we're there at Gettysburg, I thought I would interview Mark Nesbitt. Was well known. I'd read some of his books as I was looking into the subject. He graciously agreed to meet with us, and I thought, well, while I'm there, I can do a story or one of my columns on my interview with Mark. So he was very gracious. I did the story on him and his background, how he got into the paranormal. He started out as a park ranger, but we shared our experiences, and he assured us that we were not going nuts. These were very common. And he told us about his own experiences. But at the end of the interview, I wanted to get a photograph of my wife with Mark. And I had my camera. I checked the batteries at the hotel before we headed over that morning. Everything was fine. I go to take a picture, and as soon as I pressed the shutter, the camera turned off. And I was rather embarrassed. And Mark's just laughing. He said, "Happens here all the time."
Yeah, I've been in the paranormal field over 30 years, and I'm kind of retired from doing like investigations and everything, but I'm still somewhat active in it. I do more talking about it than I do investigating or seeking out things, but if it happens, I do that too. But I know all about camera batteries dying, all kinds of other equipment batteries dying, or because the spirits like to use that energy to help them manifest.
They definitely do. And since then, I've had a lot of experiences with this one. I kept pushing the shutter, and I finally did get a couple of photos. One of them is in my first book, but my camera worked fine after we left the building. About 2 days later, we were out on the battlefield. It had been raining, and it stopped, and I had wanted to go to Little Round Top. I had some relatives who actually fought in that area, and right as we got to the Confederate Avenue intersection with the road we were on, and I turned on my turn signal to go toward the Alabama Monument, the song "Sweet Home Alabama" came on the radio. Now, that could be neither here nor there. That could be pure coincidence. I don't know. But we get to the spot, and I stop, and there's fall foliage. It was a beautiful, beautiful scene. I thought, well, I'll get pictures of the Alabama Monument. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, every time I pressed the shutter, the camera turned off. And I'm thinking, it's been working. This is just odd. I was getting more than a little irritated. Same thing. I kept pressing and pressing. Did get a couple shots. Get back in the car, the van, the camera was fine. Mm-hmm. So we drove then the short distance to Little Round Top proper, and I wanted to get some photos there. The 20th Maine Monument, that was a very famous battle with the Maine troops and the Alabama troops. I went to take a picture of the 20th Maine Monument, and the same thing happened. The camera would turn off whenever I pressed the shutter. Now, it had worked fine in between the Alabama Monument and Little Round Top. Now, I could look down away from the monument and take any photo I wanted, but when I focused the camera on the monument, it would turn off whenever I pressed the shutter. As long as we were on that part of Little Round Top, I could not take a photograph of a Union monument without that happening. But I could take any scenic photo I wanted. Once we got off of Little Round Top, the camera worked fine, and it never malfunctioned like that again.
So I take it the Confederate soldiers didn't want you taking a picture of a Union monument.
And my ancestors who fought there were Alabamians, were Confederates.
Yeah, I don't know, and I haven't looked too much into it, but I know somewhere down the line in my ancestry, I am somehow related to Robert E. Lee. So,
oh, interesting.
I think it's from my Alabama or Kentucky relative, great grandmothers and stuff like that, but I can't remember how far down the line or anything like that. All I know is somehow I'm related to him. So because in your thing you mentioned about being a skeptic, and of course skepticism is healthy in the paranormal. Even me been in the field a long time, I still keep a little bit of skeptic side to me, just so that way I don't go wholeheartedly and say everything is real. No, but as a skeptic, what was your first thought when you saw the ghost of the soldier met the ghost at Gettysburg?
I'll tell you, like with the camera thing, that blew my mind. I just didn't know what to think about it. And the same thing happened with the things here at the house, footsteps, radios changing stations, turning off and on, those sorts of things. Really, I had to grapple with. And what you said about being a skeptic, I still am skeptical, and I still want to debunk. That is still my mindset, and I think that really should be the mindset of all paranormal investigators. And I agree very much with you there. The experience that led to me writing the book and the title, I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg, came from an experience on Sachs Bridge with my grandson. And I had taken him there on spring break. He was 14 at the time. And I wanted him to have a good time. We were there for history, not the paranormal. Mm-hmm. But one of the things offered to me, because I had registered as a journalist to get some behind-the-scene things, one of the things was a ghost investigation. And I asked Connor about it. He thought, yeah, Grandpa, that sounds pretty cool. So I called up and we did this. Now, I just thought this would be a touristy thing. I expected nothing out of it.
Yeah, like the Queen Mary out in California, they got a couple of tours. One is kind of a Halloween type, kind of smoke and mirrors type thing for the haunted the Queen Mary, and then they got a more of a history type ghost tour of like where the ghosts have been sighted before, or what happened to them, to why they might be there and everything. So is that basically the same there?
Yeah, I mean, they had the actual equipment. You could use a laser grid. We had EMF meters. We had a little SB7 ghost box, actually. And we went to Sachs Bridge. I was not thrilled. I'd seen Sachs Bridge before. I wanted to go on the battlefield proper or a field hospital, but the young lady who was our guide said, "You'll like Sachs Bridge." So, okay, I'll give it a try. And she was very knowledgeable, so there was history tied in, and I did not know at the time, but I'm very well aware now that Sachs Bridge, the entire area, was one vast field hospital. Many of the wounded Confederates who were unable to be taken south during the retreat were left there, as were some Union prisoners who were wounded. But when we arrived at the bridge, there were several groups investigating. It was crowded, and we were getting nothing. This was to be 2 hours. We went off to a field where that had been a field hospital. We did get a little blip on the spirit box. The investigator asked, "Can you tell us what color coat any of us is wearing?" And we did get a blue, and I had on a blue coat. But, I mean, for that one answer, she probably asked 20 or 30 things that we got no response to. We got nothing on the EMF meters, nothing with the laser grids, and we're wandering around. Now, at one point, our guide kind of jumped, and she said she saw a shadow figure, and I believe her. She seemed very sincere. And later, across the bridge in a wooded area, my grandson obviously was startled, and he saw a shadow figure. But that was it. We're like minutes away from our 2 hours being done. We come back to the bridge, and everybody else is gone. We had the bridge to ourselves, and we started getting hits on the spirit box. Is anybody with us? Yes. What year is it? Sounded like 1863. How many of you are with us? 7, 8, 9. And I'm thinking, okay, how are they pulling this hoax? It's my first experience with a spirit box other than watching on TV. And I thought, they have to be rigging this somehow to impress this journalist to try to get a good write-up. But we got a number of answers, and then it started to kind of fade. Our 2 hours was up, so the investigator went back to the car to warm it up. It was getting rather cool. And while she's doing that, my grandson and I look at each other. I thought, okay, if there's something to this, I was thinking, what would interest a soldier? So I said, do you like jokes? And got a very clear answer. Yes, sir. I thought, oh, okay. And I said, well, do you like music? And I got an answer, and there was even some inflection in the voice on the spirit box. Of course, like I had asked him an insulting question.
Yeah.
And my grandson...
They got to be entertained in the afterlife a little bit.
And my grandson is like... it's quick thinking. He's a bright, I say kid, he's a young adult now, but he says, can you play for us? And absolutely. And we started getting acoustic guitar music. Now, my first thought is, where's this coming from? It's clearly the spirit box. At this point, the investigator, since we weren't coming, had turned off the car. There was no radio music or anything. Nobody else around us. And her mouth dropped open, and she's staring at the spirit box as this acoustic guitar music's playing. I enjoy music from that period. I did not recognize the tune, but I recognized the style very much. And this went on for a while, and at one point it sounded like, I thought a mandolin. Our investigator thought a piano, but I think it was a mandolin kicked in. Okay. And this just... it wasn't a few notes. This was for minutes. And finally, when it subsided, I said, wow, you're good. And he says, thank you. I said, can you play some more? Absolutely. The music started up again, the guitar, mandolin, and a harmonica joined in. My grandson even recognized, wow, that's a harmonica. Yeah, this was stunning, and I'm just trying to figure how are they hoaxing me? How are they broadcasting to this thing? How did they know that I'm going to ask for music?
Yeah, really.
And it kept going. And finally, after the music, we started asking questions. And, is anyone with us? Yes. And this time, instead of like, I think 7, 8, 9, it was a lower number. But, we're asking, were you a soldier? Yes. Union, Confederate, Union. Asked a name. Can you give us a name? And it was a 3-syllable name. We could not make it all out, but it was a very strong and then sounded like a hard ending. And the investigators kept saying, "Can you enunciate more clearly? Can you repeat that?" And it's like this energy wanted us to have that name. It kept repeating the name, but we couldn't quite make it out. But then after all that, well, how old are you? We got, and I also asked, what unit are you in? And we got a 20. We don't know which question they were answering. Yeah. I didn't know at the time. I should have waited. But then we got unsolicited the word captain.
Okay, well, I'm going to pause you there for a moment because we're at our first commercial break, but we'll be right back after this short commercial break with my guest, Don Allison, as we talk about Ghosts of the Civil War. We'll be right back.
Do you have a talk radio, Facebook Live, or YouTube show and would like guests for your show but don't know where to go to get them? Well, go to radioguestlist.com and sign up today. They have all different experts in different fields, and you can find the ones that are just right for your show. That's radioguestlist.com. Sign up today. It's free.
To advertise on Talk in the Night, send an email to talkinthe.night@outlook.com. Talk in the Night has plans to fit your budget. Get your product or business heard around the world by the Talk in the Night listening audience. Plans include 30-second spots and banner ads on the show's website and mentioned on the social media sites. So get your product or business heard around the world today. Shop the Talk in the Night merch store today and pick up one of the many products with 9 different designs to choose from. The store has men's and women's apparel, drinkware, houseware, and accessories. Pick up a t-shirt, coffee mug, or anything else on there and support the show today. Go to talkinthe.night.com to find a link to the merch store.
Sail on off the radar and venture away from this trouble. It will find you. It's behind you. It always is. Unfold from my mind. I don't want you near. If you killed me with kindness, I'd no longer feel you here. You fall in so.
And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. Okay, and we are back with my guest, Don Allison, as we continue to talk about the ghost of the Civil War. Now, before, again, I hate pausing my guess, but I got to take a commercial break. But we were talking about the sound recording of music being played over the sound box.
Yeah. Say with little SP7 spirit box, and then we were getting the answers, giving us a name. He was a captain. It was really weird because we were trying to figure out what state he was from. He did note that he was from the Union, so I'm rattling off states. We couldn't understand the answer he gave, so I started naming states. Got nothing. When I said Ohio, we got a clear yes. And I said, oh, Connor and I are from Ohio, and the K2 meters that Connor and I were holding each went to the highest level and stayed there. The investigator sitting right next to us had a Mel meter that did nothing, absolutely nothing, which that rather amazed me.
Yeah.
But with this conversation continued for a while, it finally started to fade, but then our investigator asked, and this is how it ended. She said, "Were you hurt?" Mm-hmm. And we got this just a male scream of total anguish. It still bothers me to think about it. And then a woman crying. And that took the wind out of her sails. We were supposed to have been done about an hour ago at this point. And we, as some other people came on the other end of the bridge, we heard them getting some spirit box hits. We left. Now, I peppered this poor young lady all the way back into town, like, how was this legitimate? I mean, how do you broadcast to this? She seemed very sincere. She said no. She said she'd never had music come across. She said it was the best investigation by far she had ever done. And we were so taken when my grandson and I got back to the hotel, we set up late recalling and writing down what we recalled, so it was very fresh in our minds. Later, I called and interviewed the young lady, and anything then when I did write about it, everything that's in that is based on our recollections of the three of us.
Yeah, recollections of the experience.
But what really got me, and when I decided to write the book, is when I put on my historian hat, and I thought, okay, were there any Ohio captains killed or wounded at Gettysburg? Mm-hmm. I didn't know if there were any. Well, it turns out there were 7 killed or mortally wounded. Mm-hmm. One of them, as I researched, his name was Maelon Briggs. You may recall me talking about the 3 syllables, the on, the hard ending. Maelon Briggs was shot on day 1, taken prisoner north of town, and quite possibly died there at Sachs Bridge. He died the second day of the battle as a POW. May well have died right at the bridge.
Yeah, because I saw something about where a lot of captured soldiers, I think it was, were killed at that bridge. And so I got a feeling that because of the anguish that you mentioned coming over the spirit boxes, that's what they were recalling. Now, when you were there at the bridge, that was at night, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it was. Actually, we were getting our best results came starting just before 11 o'clock. We were there till about midnight or a little after.
Okay, and everything was just by the equipment, like the spirit box or the K2 meters. Nothing was actually seen other than like maybe the shadow figures.
Just the shadow figures at that time. It's very rare to see an entity. As you're probably well aware, much, much more likely to hear or even smell.
Yeah, or film.
No, I have seen entities at Gettysburg since then, which is an experience in and of itself.
Yeah, and I've seen some videos. I don't know if you've ever seen the video that a tourist took while driving at night and capturing what appears to be an entity crossing the road, possibly a soldier. But there's been a lot of people that are diehard skeptics. They'll say that said that it's just like a bug, or it's a reflection of the light off of the cannons,
water droplet on the windshield, or
moisture and stuff like that. And I don't know if you've ever seen the video or not.
I have, yes.
So, since you've seen it, what is your take on that?
I think it's inconclusive. One explanation that I saw applied to it was a water droplet, and there was like a demonstration done at how a water droplet on a glass can cause a distortion, but I wasn't sold that that was the explanation.
Yeah.
So I would just have to say, I don't know. The skeptic in me keeps me from saying it definitely was a soldier, but I certainly cannot say it wasn't.
Yeah, and of course, I couldn't tell too much from the video myself. It could have been because it was a little bit foggy that night on the video, so it could have been condensation. It could have been combined with the reflection of the light off of the cannons and everything bouncing back onto the windshield. So, now you mentioned actually seeing apparitions there at Gettysburg. How long after that experience at Saxbridge did you see that apparition?
Oh, that would have been about 3 or 4 years later. And the apparitions, my wife and I have a good friend. Her name is Kat Gash. She is a medium. There are some mediums I believe are very, very good, and Kat is one of them. But we both happened to be in Gettysburg at the same time, so I wanted to get her impressions of Little Round Top. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, I'm having struggle with the pollen again here. But so we arrived at the Alabama Monument, and I didn't really tell her much of anything. She knew that I had a family connection, but very vaguely. I didn't give her details. We're standing in front of the Alabama Monument, and it's not quite dark, but it's just about dark. And I was stunned because behind her, I saw 4 semi-transparent figures approaching us. And as they got closer, I realized that they had on Confederate short shell jackets, slouch hats, guns, blanket rolls, and I was stunned. Kat, as they approached her, spun around and said, "Don't sneak up on me like that." Apparently there was a 5th one that I did not see that kept going, but the other 4, not only did they stop, they stepped back about 10 feet. I am just in total awe of this. And Kat looked at me and said, "Oh, you see them too." Apparently she's used to this experience.
Yeah.
I was not. And she was communicating telepathically with them, and she said that they want us to leave. And I said, "Are they threatening us?" And she said, "No, they're concerned for us." And I I could stay there for hours looking at these figures, just kind of looking at us, just like 4 normal guys, only they're semi-transparent, whitish. You couldn't make out their facial features or their like the individual fingers, but you could see they had hands, that there was a face, a hat. But we left, and we drove them the short distance to Little Round Top. And we're standing in. Now, this is right where my ancestors fought. And in the distance, we see one black figure with a gun walking back and forth. And he has been spotted before. He's called the Sentry. They believe he's a Union soldier. And I've talked actually with a friend who had seen the sentry before, and I thought, this is cool. But then all of a sudden there were very whitish, almost bright figures appearing in that area. And then they started coming our way. And oddly, these did not have guns. They did have hats and the shell jackets. I don't recall them having blanket rolls even. But more and more of these kept coming toward us. Excuse me.
No worries. It's that time of year.
Eventually, they just kept getting closer and surrounding us. One of them made telepathic contact with Kat and said his name was Sam and that he was connected to me. I don't know of a relative named Sam, unless that was a nickname, although it's possible. I haven't investigated all the family roots. I had a number of ancestors in that brigade. But anyway, there were probably 24 of these figures, and they were reacting to us. They were silent. One of them was about 2 feet to my left, and I didn't see him come up. And I turned, and I was startled. He was quite tall, and he was right beside me. And Kat saw him and said, wow, that's a tall Gomer, isn't it? But I would have thought, had I been alone, I would have thought I was hallucinating. But because Kat's seeing and describing what I'm seeing, I realized I was not. Now, she's had these experiences before. I never had. Yeah. I did not want to leave, but she started getting uncomfortable and said we should leave. So we did. Now, because we were not investigating per se, I had no equipment with me.
Yeah.
Could not photograph or video or anything.
Yeah, and of course nowadays people can have all that equipment at their hands on phones and everything like that.
And I normally have stuff, and I did have my phone, but in the darkness, I didn't even think. I was so focused on these figures, I didn't even think to try to get video with the phone. I don't know if it would have been any good.
Yeah, you mentioned it was pretty much at dusk, correct?
And it was almost a bit foggy. Not exactly foggy, almost like almost a slight drizzle, but not enough to get you wet.
Okay. Just like that misty type fog.
And I've always wondered if those atmospheric conditions might have contributed. I wonder if it's maybe the energies of Kat being a medium, or it was just my connection of having ancestors right there during the battle. I don't know, but that I did not talk about that right away because I was afraid people would think I was nuts or making it up.
I know all about that. Like I said, I've been in the field over 30 years, and I can see and communicate with spirits. So I know what. And you talked about. She felt that uneasy feeling and everything like that, and yes, the somebody like her or myself, the spirits tend to flock to us when they know they want to get a message out. So just to give you an idea on that. Now let's get into something else here. In that story that I mentioned before I brought you on, it says there's more than 1,400 Confederate soldiers buried in various locations around town. Do you know if any Union soldiers are buried in various locations around town?
Oh, I'm sure they're undiscovered Union soldiers. They tended to be recovered more completely, but because of the terrain, the nature of things, I'd be surprised if there weren't at least some Union remains still in unknown locations.
Now, do you know what some of those locations are, and have you been to any of them?
For Union soldiers, I think it would have to be pretty haphazard. But Confederate soldiers, my wife and I have good friends who live in Gettysburg. Actually, they're from the Detroit area originally. We met them before they moved to Gettysburg, but they own the Sanders Farm.
Okay.
It was a Confederate field hospital. And after they acquired the property, they still have about 10 acres, I believe, with it. The Park Service contacted them and told them that they have probably at least a dozen unmarked Confederate graves on their property.
Yeah, because I saw something that people are still, to this day, find human remains from that time period.
Now, our friends will not disturb them, but one grave was marked. It's kind of a sad story. It has a W carved in a rock for a headstone. Apparently, the soldier's cousin buried him and had written home about the location and intended to come retrieve his cousin after the war, but the cousin was killed later. So the body was never recovered. Now the family, the Sanders family, their descendants owned the property up until our friends purchased it, and the family knew the story of the soldier.
Okay, and did you write about that story in your book?
I have not. I will be writing about that in a forthcoming book about that property, actually. It's a pretty amazing property. It's quite active. We did find what we believe is one of the unmarked graves using dowsing rods. Now, of course, our friends will not disturb these graves under any circumstance. But
yeah, and of course, disturbing them, even when you got locations, homes that are haunted, or at least this is my belief and a lot of belief in the paranormal field, that if you do home renovations on, say, like your house where it's 1800s home, that tends to pick up the energy, the activity in the home.
Oh, that's been our experience very much. We're restoring, not renovating, but we're modernizing our 1830s home. And yeah, when we're doing work is when we get activity.
Yeah, and I think what it is, I'm sure it plays a part in the Gettysburg battlefield, is they're used to the way it used to be, not the way it is now. Now, on when you saw those spirits and everything like that there, or even with the spirit box, now there are two different types of hauntings, residual haunting and intelligent haunting. Now, you mentioned about one of the 5 apparitions passing you up. Do you think, or did the medium say that they were intelligent hauntings, or residual hauntings, or anything like that, or she not even mentioned that?
These obviously were intelligent because they reacted to us. They backed up when Kat spoke to them, and they were like looking at us. And when we were at the big group later, they were gathering around us and getting closer and closer, like we were the spectacles.
Yeah,
is the best way to describe it. Very intelligent. Now, I'm used to dealing with both. We have residual hauntings here in our house and intelligent. I'm quite used to dealing with both, but these entities were definitely intelligent.
Now, you mentioned they didn't have any, or didn't seem like they had any muskets or anything like that. Do you think that area might have been part where they captured the opposite forces, whether they be Confederate or Union?
Yeah, we were on the slope of Little Round Top. That was a slaughter pen. Absolute slaughter pen. There were a number of Confederates captured toward the end of the battle. My own great-great-grandfather's one of them. But where we first saw the small group at the monument, that's where they formed up to make the charge. those entities ironically had guns. I think that's interesting. In blanket rules, the entities we saw on Little Round Top where the fierce fighting took place, other than the one, the sentry, I don't recall any of them having guns. Okay. I find that, looking back, I find that interesting.
Yeah, I would too if it's at a point where there was a huge bloody battle right there on that battlefield, that they would not have guns. So that's why I was wondering, maybe they were capturing they were prisoners and held in that area or something like that.
But and the thing about it, I was not in the least bit intimidated or frightened. I was fascinated, but it was a warm evening. It was in September, but it was a warm evening, but it got intensely cold when the figures were gathered around us. As a matter of fact, Kat told me later I was shivering. I was so fascinated I wasn't paying attention to that.
Yeah, and of course I can tell you all about the stories about, because a lot of people, when they feel presence, they'll feel that cold or like the goosebumps on their hands, arms and stuff like that. And everything like that. But there's been one time where I actually was in a home in Southern California doing kind of helping a family member of the people that were moving out, because I did a cleansing first, and then we contacted the family member that died there and helped him cross over. And we're in a room, it's 105 degrees outside. The house, we're in a small 20 by probably about 15 of us in a 20 by 12 room, 12 by 10 room or something like that. It was small. And I'm standing we're kind of in a circle and everything like that. And I'm on one side, and people across the room from me, as I opened up that doorway for that spirit to come in, they felt a cold blast as if like an air conditioner had been turned on. Well, the house had no electricity because they were selling the house. So everything was closed up. The window and the door was closed. 15, 20 people and 105 degrees outside, you'd think that would be hot as heck. But they felt like a 30-degree drop in temperature. So I know all about the spirits being able to make you feel a chill.
And we've even felt that here in our own house. You'll feel a cold spot. We have a parrot, and he will play peekaboo with unseen things. And one time he was particularly intent on playing with something in our dining room, and I followed where he was staring. And when I got to that corner, it was decidedly colder than the rest of the room.
Yeah, and of course, animals and children, and I've mentioned this the past couple of nights with my guests, but animals and children are not corrupted by the everyday world. They're not filtered, so they're able to notice the spirit world more than somebody that's an adult.
Yeah, I had somebody joke with me that maybe I could get an EVP by parrot. We, at one time, for some reason, about 3 p.m, this happened 3 or 4 days in a row, I was home alone, but I heard what sounded like a woman coughing in our living room. That's down the hall from my home office. Very distinct. When it happened the first day, I thought somebody was here. And I went down to see him. No, I was home alone. But what's really funny is it happened the next 2 or 3 days, and the parrot imitated the cough. He will imitate my wife and I's cough. And he imitated this ghost cough.
Okay. So people possibly thought maybe the parrot is actually mimicking something and not a spirit.
But it was not. But it was not the parrot making the noise. The cough was distinctly human, and I even heard it. Well, I could see the bird that he was not doing it, but he imitated it. It's a much more distinct, different sound.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're at the break at the top of the hour, but we'll be right back after the short commercial break with my guest, Don Allison, as we continue talking about Ghost of the Civil War and his books about it. And also after the break, the phone lines and the chat will be open. If you got a question for my guest, Don Allison, feel free to call in or pop in the chat and ask it. I'll ask him that way. We'll be right back after the short commercial break. The weather is getting warmer and people are out and about. Well, if you love ghost hunting, now is the time to pick up some new gear. GhostStop.com has a wide variety of equipment to choose from, and one of those items is Blue Buddy. He's back. The talking bear every investigator wants on their team. Click on the Ghost Stop banner ad at the top of the show's website and pick up your Blue Buddy today. Go to spring.com and sign up to create your own design or choose from a design from one of the many creators on there. Spring has ways to integrate your store on social media, custom stores, and they have digital and physical products. While you're there, check out the Talk in the Night merch store. To get started with Spring today, click on the banner ad on the Talk in the Night website. Go to the show's website and click on the links for each of my guests and purchase a book or other product that they may be promoting. Without them, there would be no Talk in the Night. Whether you're interested in the paranormal, conspiracy, technology, health, relationships, or any other topic the show covers, my guests have something for you. Check it out today on talkingthenight.com.
Are you alright? They asked me, sitting with a glass of whiskey, eyes glazed over, looking at the skyline. Said, friend, you know I love this city, but sometimes you have to excuse me. I let myself get lost up in my mind, and I go to my countryside.
To call into the show, Skype Talk in the Night or by phone at 817-717-1280. Now back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Experiences. Okay, and we are back with my guest, Don Allison. Of course, the phone lines are open. The chat is open. If you got a question for my guest, feel free to pop in the chat, ask it there, or feel free to call in to the show and ask him. So let's get back into just until we get a call, or if we get a call. Let's get into some of the locations, because you mentioned Sachs Bridge. Have you been to any of the other locations there in the battle? Well, you mentioned, of course, the Round Top and everything like that, but besides those locations, what other locations have you been to?
I've been to quite a number. I had mentioned the Sanders Farm. Actually, our friends host paranormal investigations there because it is so active. And I find that to be my favorite place because I've never failed to get something. I mean, you've investigated, you know how it is. You can spend hours at a place and get absolutely nothing.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
we've all been there probably.
Yeah, there's been times that I've been at a location, sat there for about 30 minutes with the recorder in complete silence and nothing. So I know all about that.
But the basement of this house is amazing. And the first time I investigated there, I made contact with using a spirit box with an entity. You know, were you a soldier? Yes. Union, Confederate, rebel. And I asked, well, what unit were you in? 34th Virginia. Mm-hmm. And I immediately thought with that high number, oh, infantry. Mm-hmm. And the entity came back, no cavalry, and he refused to talk with me the rest of that evening. I'd insulted him. Later on, though, I returned and talked to him again. His name is Jackson. That's the only name. Is that your first name or last name? Jackson. And because of contact others have had, a medium says that he appears to have been, say, a camp servant, perhaps, to a Confederate officer there. But he will play with toys. I've seen him actually move like marbles. He will ask for me when I've not been there for a while. And every time I've gone into the basement and asked to speak with him, he has spoken with me.
Now,
I find that amazing.
Now, you mentioned about the basement. Was that basement used as possibly a field hospital? Hospital.
Yeah, the house and the grounds are a documented Confederate field hospital, mainly cavalry. And I found it interesting that Jackson said 34th Virginia because the 34th Battalion of Virginia Infantry was right there. As a matter of fact, in the basement, they uncovered a Confederate officer's belt buckle of the 34. So this was after the contact. I had no clue. Didn't even know there was that high a number of Virginia cavalry involved, let alone being actually there at that location.
Yeah, you were just thinking infantry and not cavalry. And, of course, as you said, the spirit seemed annoyed that you would mention him as infantry and not cavalry.
But yeah, and I've had other entities. One of the former owners of the place has nothing to do with the Civil War. Is a rather crude, a rather obnoxious, mean old guy. He swears a lot. He will come through. But once we were with a group in the woods, and my friend had to go back to the house for something. When he went to go back, the spirit box, someone said, halt. One of the people in the group saw something, turned and took a picture, and his picture captured what appears to be a Confederate soldier bending around a tree with a musket. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that would be an incredible photo. Now, other than those locations, have you been to the Farnsworth House?
I have taken just a tour there. I've not stayed there. It's a very popular spot. When I've been in town, that has always been full. But that is noted as a very active location. I have investigated the Fairfield Inn. It's on Lee's retreat route outside of town. And that was quite active. We got some interesting results there. But it was a field hospital.
Okay. Now, speaking of the Farnsworth House, I know it said that there is I guess in the basement there, that there is a non-human entity. Of course, there's a symbol on the door that they put there to kind of keep it down there. But since you've never been there or really gone on any of the tours or anything, have you run across any other location non-human entities?
Yes. I have another friend who resides near Gettysburg who just seems to have a real attraction for activity. And with her, we investigated the site of a Union Field Hospital, and you could see shadows moving in the woods, hear them stirring, and they would answer some questions. Yes, they were Union soldiers and so forth. It's a documented field hospital site. I'm just trying to think, my wife and I, and I should preface this, you're not allowed to do paranormal investigations per se on park property. They will confiscate. They say the EMF meters can be used to find metal relics, and they will confiscate them. They do not like. One of my friends was actually told that the spirits are protected by the Park Service.
Wow,
that being said, you can use, I mean, they can't stop you from using an app on a phone or a handheld recorder. Now, my wife and I were at the site of a German unit that actually I'm researching and want to do a book on. They were overrun on day one. These poor guys were treated very badly because they were Germans. The Germans were looked down upon. They had a commander who gave orders in German, and they were just in one of the worst spots imaginable on the first day. They were flanked and overrun. But my wife and I ended up stopping there, and I was curious. I'd done some research. We got out, and I started talking naming some names. Are you here? Let me know if you're here. And orbs are controversial, but once I started talking and naming names, we started getting orbs. My wife was taking photographs. The photographs before I started talking had no orbs, but there were numerous orbs when I started talking. But the really interesting one was I got out my EMF meter, which luckily no park rangers came and confiscated it or cited me. But I said, okay, if you're here, I'm going to count to 3. And on the count of 3, if you touch this little white box, you can make the needle move, and I'll know you're here. And I counted to 3. The needle did move substantially, and my wife took a photo right at that instant, and I heard her go, oh, my God. And she showed me her photograph. There's a large orb right above the EMF meter. And you can even see that, like, it cuts off the corner of the monument behind it. You can see that it isn't something close to the lens. It is there above the EMF meter. We tried some EVPs. My wife is of German ancestry. So she said, I'm German. I have German ancestors. I'm proud of being German. Are you proud of your German heritage? And, of course, we didn't hear anything at the time. We got back to the hotel room and played it back. And to that question, we got a very clear, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's my best ever EVP.
And that was clear. You could actually, because I know there's times when you'll get EVPs that will be hard to understand or kind of undiscernible, if you will, to what they're saying. And then there's what we call Class A EVPs, where it's clear as if they were standing right next to you talking.
And I'd say a majority of the EVP responses I've gotten have been unintelligible or nearly so. This one was clear as a bell.
Okay. I know a lot of times it's hard to understand. And, of course, there's people, again, with the skeptics, and I understand because, like I said, skeptics are, excuse me, I had a hiccup, healthy in the paranormal field to keep us in check, and we tend to keep them in check too. But as far as the EVPs go, a lot of people think, well, somebody was whispering or talking, and on some of those unintelligible EVPs, could have somebody, and I like to play devil's advocate every once in a while, throw my guest off with the curveball and everything like that. Could there have been somebody possibly whispering or something like that that made it unintelligible?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you need to really keep your guard up. But this one, it was only my wife and I, and it was quite clear. Another really good EVP experience I had actually using a Phasma box, version of a ghost box. We were investigating a Gettysburg site, and we heard two men and a woman speaking, and we finally concluded it was German. And we could not tell if they were reacting to us or just speaking among themselves. I have heard EVPs of conversations that obviously had nothing to do with the investigators. We thought maybe that's what's going on here. Well, we were moving to a different location into a woods, so I'm back alone with the Phasma box, and out of the blue, one of the males asked, "Are you Dutch?" Of course, that was the term used in the Civil War for Germans. And I just chuckled and I said, no, I'm not Dutch. I have some German ancestry, but I'm not German. And I thought a minute, and so I said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" Which, of course, is, do you speak German in German? The woman answered, "Nein," and all three of them started laughing. Great EP. And one of the other investigators overheard part of it, and everybody, when they heard me laugh, then wanted to know what was up. Unfortunately, we did not have video running of that. That would have been great.
That would have been. Now, besides seeing the ghosts that you talked about hearing them, of course, over the spirit box or with a digital recorder, now, have you heard anything audible without the equipment?
I have. And actually, the first time I was with my grandson, the same trip we had the Sax Brady experience. We stayed at a hotel on the edge of East Cemetery Hill. And about 2 a.m, when we woke up, something was walking in our hotel room. Like there was a person walking on the carpet and even jiggling the coat hangers, but nobody was there. And my grandson's like, "Grandpa, someone's in the room." I said, "Sure sounds like it." We were just about back to sleep, and then we heard a cannon roar on East Cemetery Hill.
Okay, I was about to ask that because I know people have mentioned about hearing the sound of cannons firing and everything like that.
And that is pretty common. And my grandson says, "Grandpa, that sounded like a cannon," because I'm a living historian, and he's been to reenactments. He's heard them, and that's clearly what it was. And another time, I was unfortunately by myself near the Slider Farm, was a field hospital near Little Round Top, and I heard artillery fire, and I just assumed that it was an artillery demonstration. They'd had reenactors earlier in the day. This was like late afternoon. So I thought, wow, they sounded pretty good. So I was going to go back and chat with them, but when I drove back, they were gone.
Okay.
And obviously had not been there when I'd heard the cannon fire.
Yeah. Of course, like I said, I mentioned was somehow related to Robert E. Lee. Of course, I have a fascination with the Old West and the Civil War. Because of that ancestry, but just something about it fascinates me. But of course, living here in Fort Worth, I'm at the beginning of where the West begins. Basically, that's the slogan of Fort Worth. So, the Old West history of the stockyards and everything, it always intrigues me, and gotten some EVPs down there, but and other things. Now, speaking of hearing, have you felt anything other than like the cold spots and everything like that, like a presence pushing you or touching you or pulling on your shirt or anything like that?
Not at Gettysburg, but in my house on more than one occasion, I and others have been touched. And the most humorous one, I was working in back of the house, and it's an area where we do often hear things. And I actually had something tug on my underwear. I was bent over, my underwear was sticking out. And I mean, it was enough to make me jolt, and there was nobody there, and I cannot account for that in any other way than that spirit did it. And we do believe we have a spirit of a young boy here, and he likes our basement. One time I was bending down on one knee to getting something in the basement, and my ear got flicked. There was nothing there to account for that. My grandson had something touch his hand, and he visibly jumped. And I was watching him, and nothing was there to account for that.
Okay, and of course, going off another sense, the smelling anything like perfume, cigar smoke, or anything like that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, some good friends of ours, when we first moved into the house, super skeptical of any of the paranormal things. But we're sitting there, and my friend started sniffing. He says, "I smell cigar smoke." And I just started laughing. Yep. It's kind of a sweet cigar smell, or sweet pipe tobacco, actually. And I have smelled that numerous times, and that convinced him. We often smell an old-time liniment, is what it smells like in our guest room, and also an old-fashioned lilac perfume from time to time.
Okay.
Here in the house.
Now, that's at the house. How about, like, in Gettysburg?
I have not smelled anything that I could not possibly account for, but the smell of fires and also of gunpowder. It's a very distinct sulfur smell, and that is commonly reported. I've not experienced it, but I've talked with those who have.
Now, at the battlefield, different locations, like you mentioned, Round Top, have you been to other sites in the battlefield, such as, like, Devil's Den?
Yeah, I have not investigated there, but I have visited it frequently, and there is really an energy there. I'm not a medium, although I've had a few medium-type experiences, but I'm very much sensitive to energies, and there's a distinct one there.
Okay, yeah, because for somebody that, like I said, I have a fascination with the Civil War and everything like that. Of course, here in Texas, there's a Confederate museum, which I haven't had a chance to visit yet, but I want to. But I always find it, one of these days I'm going to make my way up there just to visit the battleground and everything like that, just to see what I feel. Now, I talked about I asked about the Farnsworth House. Now, I saw a thing on another house that was turned into an orphanage after the war for the children of those soldiers that were killed in battle. And, of course, it said that the mistress of the house kind of tortured the kids. Have you been to that location?
I have been there. I have not had the occasion to investigate. Typically, you have to rent the entire thing for like an evening, or they will have guided investigations, and I have not taken part in any of those, but I have visited the building, and it's got quite a nasty history to it. Yeah, the woman was very cruel.
Yeah, because I saw something about that when looking into it for questions and everything like that. What was the name of that? I didn't write it down, and I forgot what it was. What was the name of that orphanage?
Oh, I'm trying to think of. It was, I believe, just called the Gettysburg Orphanage, and I can't believe I can't tell you that woman's name. I should just be able to rattle it right off my tongue, but
yeah, like I said, I'm trying to look it up right now just to see if I can remember, but I can't not find it anywhere. But of course, there's a lot of stuff on Gettysburg, as highly active as it is. Now, what do you say to those that don't believe any of the ghost sightings there or any of the paranormal activity there, being a skeptic yourself?
I just tell people that there is overwhelming evidence of, I like to call it continuation of consciousness after death. I think is the best way to describe it. And I won't argue with people. One time I was doing a book signing in Gettysburg, and I had a gentleman be very rude to me. That people like me, ghost hunters, are ruining Gettysburg. And I finally just asked him, look, I've listened to you, just go away. And he persisted. I said, have you read my book? Well, no. I said, you read my book and come talk to me. Well, it turns out he is a historian there, and I had contact with him later, and I don't know what the turnabout was, but I was doing some research for my follow-up book, and he was very kind, very generous, and very helpful to me in my research. So, but yeah, there's always going to be skeptics. I've had one guy, I was doing a book signing, and a gentleman came over and told me that I was dealing with Satan. And
I've got that plenty of times.
Yeah, but this guy was really something. He's like telling me that, well, I said, I'm not seeing anything that I think is demonic. Well, how do you know? How do you know? I said, I just know. He said, well, did you rebuke it in the name of Jesus? And I said, no, I really didn't feel much of a need to rebuke anything. And he got disgusted and walked away. The funny part was his wife bought one of my books.
Maybe she bought it, made him read it, and maybe it changed his mind. Who knows?
But yeah, some people you just can't, like that guy, you just can't argue with. But I tell people to have an open mind, and that's really one of the things I found by writing my books. Every time I give a talk, it seems like people stick around. There's always one or two people. They wait till no one else is around, then they'll approach me and talk about their own experience, their own haunting in their house. And they're looking for reassurance. And there's a lot of that out there. I think more and more mainstream science is starting to really pay attention.
Yeah, because of course,
a lot of this.
Yeah, because when I started in the field back in the early '90s, it wasn't popular as it is today. It wasn't cool to talk about on the playground or anything like that. Of course, I was out of high school back then, but
what a good one. I have a friend, very nice gentleman. He's a noted Civil War historian. I've done book signings with him. First time I did a book signing with him that I had my paranormal book, I kind of anticipated, I didn't think he'd be nasty, but I anticipated some pushback. And he talks to me a little bit about the book, and he says, he says, I just don't believe in that, but let me tell you my experience. He said he and a friend arrived in Gettysburg on a rainy night after dark, and they thought, well, since they were in town, that they would drive off the main Route 30 coming in and drive through the old seminary. And in front of them ran a horse, a riderless horse with a Civil War saddle blanket, and crossed the road in front of them and disappeared into the darkness. And he said he and his friend looked at each other and said, did you see that? Yeah. And he said the weird thing was it made no noise. And if that would have been a horse with metal horseshoes on the asphalt pavement, it would have made quite a racket.
Yeah.
So, I found that refreshing.
I want to ask you more about that after the commercial break, but we'll be at our last break of the night, but we'll be right back with my guest, Don Allison, as we continue talking about Ghost of the Civil War. We'll be right back.
Broken down and aching fears, and I can't seem for the life of me to hold back these tears. Now they're flowing like a river alongside the remnants of my soul. I'm strung out in the heartland alone. And damn this restless labor, it's a blessing and a curse. I work all day and turn all night just to hide you from my hurt.
Do you need music for your radio show, podcast, or YouTube channel, but need a music license to play it on your show? Well, go to artlist.io and check out the plans they have. They have 3 plans to choose from: personal, unlimited, and enterprise. All the music that you hear on the show is from Artlist, and there is a banner ad on the show's website. Check it out today. Do you love the strange, unusual, and weird unexplained mysteries? Do you like reading about the paranormal and other happenings? Well, I have the website for you, unexplainedmysteries.com. On there you will find so much, such as the latest news and articles, forums, news with video, and so much more. That's unexplained-mysteries.com, or you can click on the banner ad on the show's website to take you right there. Do you love history? Do you wonder what happened on this day in history? Well, check out history.com/this day in history and find out what happened on this day in recorded history. You can also click on the image on the Talk of the Night website under This Day in History and check out one of the many things that happened. The show's website lists a different event in history every day, so check it out today.
Call into the show, Skype, Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-1280. Now back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil.
Okay, and we are in the last segment of the show. So if you got a question for my guest, Don, feel free to, there's a little chat bubble, click on that on Spreaker. Type in your question for him if you got a question, or call in. The numbers are by Skype, Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-1280. All right, so before the break, you were talking about the riderless horse. Now, have you experienced anything like that as far as spirit animals?
I have not. But that is a fairly common occurrence. I know at Gettysburg, the horses seem to be a common experience that people encounter.
Yeah, because I know I've seen that a lot of people talk about in different articles saying that a lot of, not only the soldiers were killed, but the horses and animals that were around there at that time were also killed. Now, go ahead.
I have a friend who spotted a horse and the torso of a rider. Confederate rider, no head. But he saw the horse and the torso.
Oh, that would definitely be a sight to see. Now, there is another location that I wanted to ask about and see if you had been there and what your thoughts on it would be. I saw, I think it was a video on it. Matter of fact, I know it was a video. I just can't remember the name of the location. I had it written down, and again, when I dropped every 30 minutes before and didn't have it saved, I was like, no! But anyways, there is a house that a lady that was, I think, either married or engaged to one of the soldiers, but she was in her home, and she had one door closed and another door kind of open to kind of protect her from any gunshot while it went through both doors. Have you been to that location?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do book signings at that location every time I'm in Gettysburg, and I've done the tour. I have not investigated. That building's owned by the same people who own the orphanage, and you can take tours, or evening investigations that they lead, or you can rent the facility. So I've not gotten the chance to investigate. That being said, my grandson took a photo in the upstairs of the Jenny Wade house and got a very distinct, unusual orb that does not appear to match what you would see from a bug or dust
or mist or the water droplet or something like that.
Yeah, just a very unusual orb.
Okay, now looking at it, when I saw the video, and of course people don't know exactly. They know about like bullet holes and stuff like that into things, but using muskets back then, that looked, looking at the video, it looked like, or at least on the video, it looked like it was a fairly large hole, more than something but a musket ball, not the size of a cannonball, but more than something that looked like possibly a musket ball. Could it have been something, I don't want to say like a cannonball, but something larger than possibly a musket ball, or did the video probably just kind of make that look a little weird?
Was that the door that the bullet went through that killed Jenny Wade? Is that what you're referring to?
I think it was the white door that the hole looked a little large.
Yeah, what happened through the years, people have put their fingers in it and worn it larger. It would have been, was a Confederate fired bullet, so it was probably .577 caliber, probably from an Enfield musket. Most likely fired from the Farnsworth House, too, which I find interesting.
Yeah, because I heard that there were also snipers there, and people would be firing from the upstairs while people down on the battlefield would be firing back up there. And of course, that I can't remember if that was the building or not. You can see a lot of bullet holes inside on the house itself.
Yeah, there's a lot of buildings that have bullet holes, and some of the bullet holes are large. There's one building that actually has an unexploded artillery shell stuck in the wall.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting.
I'm surprised that it hasn't been tried to be diffused or anything like that.
But many of the buildings that were there during the battle are pockmarked, from bullets.
Okay. Now, for somebody like myself that has never been there to the battlefield or anything like that, for somebody that would love to go visit something like that, what would you tell them, and where would you tell them probably the best site to go to?
I would recommend, it depends on your budget. Definitely visit the visitor center. It's you can see part of it free. You can see all of it for a pretty small fee. Now, if you're willing to spend some money, you can get a guide. So most of the day, driving your vehicle and giving you a personalized tour of the battlefield. For a much less than that, you can take a bus tour. And I recommend doing one or the other because that gives you a familiarity of the overall battlefield, and then you can go visit any spots then that look of more interest to you.
Now, the tour that you were on at the Sachs Bridge, was that like just that was a personal, not personal, but one of the tours, many tours that the town has, correct?
Correct. And this was actually an investigation, a personal investigation. You're basically paying to have an investigator, bring the equipment and take you on the investigation. And you can investigate many sites that way in Gettysburg.
And about how much do those usually run for those that would want to know something like that?
It kind of depends on how involved they are, what the site is, but yeah, you're talking anywhere. You can take just a simple tour for like $8-10 a person. You can get a pretty decent investigation for probably more like $25, $30, $40 a person.
Okay. Now, talking about all the locations and everything like that, are there hidden spots that a lot of people don't know about unless they've lived there or know a lot about the Gettysburg?
Yeah, actually, it's such a large battlefield. I mean, it's a huge area, and you can find hidden spots all over on the battlefield. There's actually a very infrequently visited place that they call the Lost Monuments, and it's a road that has some monuments that almost nobody has seen. I had to find out how to get there. But one of my favorites is the Slider Farm. You have to walk there. It's a bit of a walk, but it was a Confederate field hospital, and it is a great site. Still has the barn, some outbuildings, and the home. But you can kick around in the fields and in the woods and find spots where there was pretty heavy fighting that really people just don't, as a rule, go to.
All right. And now, how long after your first book, I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg, did you write the sequel to it, I Met More Ghosts at Gettysburg?
The book came out roughly 2 years after my first one, although I started working on it very soon after because that first book opened so many doors to me, and I just made so many contacts that I knew that was the direction I needed to go with my writing at that point, and still the direction I'm moving today.
And you also mentioned about another book kind of to follow up to that. I mean, is that something that's still in the works, or has it already been published?
Yes, actually, because the Gettysburg archives were closed down due to the pandemic, and I have not been able to make it back to finish the work, but I'm doing a book on the 107th Ohio Regiment, the German regiment I talked about earlier. I was led to write about them. There's some paranormal occurrences, and I address, the book will be paranormal mixed with history. I'm also working on a book, basically the best evidence for the continuation of consciousness after death. I was invited to take part in a contest by the Bigelow Foundation for that. I was not a winner, but I was a finalist. The people I was competing against were primarily, PhDs and people who've been researching for, in some cases, decades.
Yeah.
So, and that essay is the basis of a book I'm working on as well.
Now, though, I met a ghost at Gettysburg, and I met more ghosts at Gettysburg. Are those the only books that you have on Gettysburg itself? Because I noticed on your website there's a book, Hell on Bell Island.
Yeah, and that addresses the prison camp where the enlisted Union soldiers captured at Gettysburg were taken to Belle Isle. And actually, the soldier who wrote the diary that the book is based on was part of the Gettysburg campaign. His cavalry unit actually were the ones who destroyed Lee's pontoon bridge over the Potomac River. He was captured after that, but many of the people that he was incarcerated with were from Gettysburg, so there's a distinct Gettysburg connection to the book. I'm actually doing a revised version of that right now that will be out very soon. I ran across some additional information that I am adding in for the next print run.
Okay, so how many in total books do you have on Gettysburg?
Actually, on Gettysburg proper, those are the only ones. I have done a book on a gentleman, George W. Peck, who was really quite a comedian, but I have a book based on his Civil War experiences. He was a cavalryman out of Wisconsin, actually. Fascinating gentleman. And other books I've done touch on the aspects of the Civil War, like with Northwest Ohio's involvement. I'm also co-authoring a history of the 38th Ohio Regiment in the Civil War. They were not at Gettysburg. They were in the Western Theater, Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, and then up through the Carolinas.
Okay, now, because we're getting close to the end, and we talked about it near the beginning of the show about your interview in World War I to Iraq War veterans. Have you written any books about some of the stories that you've heard from them on the interviews?
I wrote many newspaper accounts based on those, and one of the future projects I would like to put together my World War I and World War II interviews. I had the occasion just to be able to say that I met and interviewed World War I soldiers. Their experience was just as horrible as World War II and Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, my dad was a Vietnam and Korea veteran, and I was a first Persian Gulf War vet.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for your service.
Thank you. Now, where can people find out more information about the books and where they can get them?
The best place for more information would be to go to fadedbanner.com for all my books, and column and so forth. For the paranormal books, the ghost books, go to metaghost.com. As far as purchasing the books, are available in a lot of locations. You can get them online through Amazon, or you can order them online through my website, which, quite frankly, I prefer because I get a little bigger cut.
Yeah, more cut of it. Than,
be quite honest.
It's always fun to get more out of what you produce and everything like that. Now, on your website, you got different things like talked about Hell on Belle Island, the books, the blog, and there was another thing, 76 Minutes, the search for the missing skeleton brothers. Did that have anything to do with like the Civil War, or is it just like talked about covering murder trials and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, that's a very famous case of three brothers who came up missing, and their dad is suspected, and he is in prison on related charges. But that book, I edited and published. My publishing company published it, but it was written by our Bryan Times news reporter who was on staff. And he has covered that event from day one up through the current day. And he has explored theories, talked to a lot of law enforcement people. And it's a very fascinating book on a case that drew a lot of nationwide attention.
All right, yeah, because I wanted to see now, like that book, and then, of course, all the books about Gettysburg and the Civil War. And then I asked about the writing about the interviews that you had with the veteran, the war heroes and everything like that. Have you thought about writing any other experience, like other paranormal experiences elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm very much looking to do a sort of a different book. Tale of Two Hauntings, kind of exploring our house, and then I had mentioned the Sanders farmhouse in Gettysburg that our friends own, and just kind of some similarities of our experiences, just, really exploring the paranormal, and part of it would be what it's like to live in a very active house. And from two different perspectives of people who do that.
Okay, yeah, because that would probably be interesting, especially if people out there have a real strong interest in the paranormal. I know I got one friend that is also big into the Civil War. He does Civil War reenactments and everything like that out in California. That good distance away from anywhere where any battles took place, but as people know, that California was more geared towards the Union, whereas like where I'm at in Texas, we were Confederate, so are sympathizers with the Confederacy. But like I said, I'm pretty sure he's listening right now. If not, he's going to be listening later on. But I'm sure he would enjoy the books that you have on the Civil War.
And I do a lot of speaking to historical and Civil War groups, outside of the paranormal, just, the straight history too.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't think to ask about that, but do you go to like maybe different battlefields, not just in Gettysburg, but other battlefields, or where battles had taken place, to speak on the Civil War, not as paranormal related, but to speak on the Civil War?
Yeah, I have different places, and I love to visit the battlefields just to experience them. There is an energy there and a sense of what happened that you really can't get any other way.
Okay. Now, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that? Or even to speak at like a reenactment or something like that?
Yeah, you can contact me through either of the websites. I have a real simple email, don@fadedbanner.com. Faded Banner Publications is my publishing company. So, yeah, don@fadedbanner.com. There's a toll-free number and email contact information in each of the books and on the website as well.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. We're at about 5 minutes till the end of the show. But thank you for coming back on the show, and I look forward to talking to you maybe one of these days, getting up there and visiting Gettysburg and probably running into you there.
Yeah, it would be great. I've really enjoyed the show. Again, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. For those listening, tomorrow night we're going to be joined with my guest, Sylvia Schultz. I've had her on the show before, but we're going to be talking about her book, Days of Dead, A Year of True Ghost Stories, and we'll be revisiting her other books that she's written on and her visits to Peoria State Hospital. So we're going to get into that. We're also talking about her new book coming out soon called Grave Deeds and Dead Plots. So please join me tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time or Daylight Time, just so that people know that my computer automatically changes with the time, so that way I know that it's going to be 9 p.m. Central Time, and so that's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can hear the show on, if you want to listen live, it's on Spreaker.com. Of course, visit the website. Make sure that you visit all the social media sites. I'll update when I'm on, when I'm live, everything like that. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe. Facebook, Twitter, Discord, Instagram, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn. I don't really got it listed too much because that's more personal than for the show, but I do post things about the show on LinkedIn too, because that helps me with connections in the field of not only the paranormal, but in radio and everything like that. So join me tomorrow night as I welcome my guest, Sylvia Schultz. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe on all the social medias. And again, Spreaker.com. That's where I am live, but also the show is also heard, I don't think live, but also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn, Facebook Podcasts, and of course YouTube. So until tomorrow night, when I welcome my guest, Sylvia Schultz, and of course Friday night is Friday Night Open Lines, where you can call and share your stories, experiences, and everything like that, or type them in the chat. So until then, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank again my guest, Don, for coming on the show. And until then, I shall see you on the dark side. Good night from Talk in the Night.
Late at night, darkness has fallen. Turn on the radio, and you hear him talking. Listening to what he has to say, all about the paranormal and all of the things. When he sounds off, you can hear him say, see you on the dark side. Yes, you can hear